What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. Excuse me, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Care, also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national father organization. And through that collaboration with Dad Central and Dove Men Care, I've been able to reach out directly or indirectly to over 75,000 fathers this year. I'm also the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, which is a multimedia not-for-profit that amplifies Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, drink, and travel. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. But we're on a Sunday afternoon, October 24th. The cold weather is coming slowly but surely in Toronto. So we're just trying to stay warm now for the next few months. Most Sunday afternoons, we do Black Canada Talking. Black Canada Talking is a great place where what we do on Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians to give their takes and POVs on stories and things that are of importance to them, also POVs, and we also spotlight Black Canadians. But today we're doing a roundtable, which is always a good thing. We do this usually every 2 weeks, bi-weekly. So we have three of panelists who are all smarter than me here today. And as always, I go to ladies first. That's the way I was raised, or women first. I don't know which way to do it. So I want to make sure I cover both bases today. Love to welcome Dr. L. Jones. What's going on, Dr. L?
Good evening. How are you? I'm good.
It's so good to see you. What's been going on?
Nothing much, just work. Trying to enjoy the last of the fall weather before winter hits,
Yeah.
Really nothing exciting. How have you been?
Well, you know what? A lot of exciting and then potentially even more exciting things going on, helping our people. So I'm doing the background work, doing the grunt work. I had a 2-hour meeting this morning on a potential very large project that would be spotlighting Black Canadians right across this country.
Nice.
So I'm really looking forward to it. I know that in the past you've mentioned you're a runner. Are you still running in this crazy weather?
Oh my gosh, I run in blizzards. I run every day.
Oh,
This is nice. This is good, actually.
Good weather.
Fall is the best time to run. It's like, when it's 6 a.m. and it's pelting rain or like frozen rain and it's icy and then you're like, but right now it's actually nice. So yeah.
Pelting rain.
Yeah. And actually, the women's world record in the half marathon was shattered by more than a minute this morning by Lesembet Gidey, an Ethiopian runner running in Valencia. So perhaps one of the best performances we've seen in athletics in a long time. So that's exciting.
Well, thank you for the update. How are the students doing?
Oh, they're good. It's interesting because I introduced them to a lot of new material. Like I have my first year course is citizenship, diversity, and identity in Canada. So we talk a lot about like the border and how nationhood is constructed and settler colonialism. And it's very funny because they have journal entries are like, well, I used to like Canada, my 4 students, but no, they're really good. They're great. Like they listen, they put forward their own views, they take things in.
I wonder how I would survive in one of your classes.
No, I'm actually very gentle with them.
I know you are.
I ask a lot intellectually of them, but in terms of they always get room to express their own opinions. They don't have to replicate what I say. I try to always make that clear and talk to them about, our different viewpoints and bias, and they're very good. So it's nice.
I'd probably shock the heck out of you if I came into your class one day and took a seat. I'd probably shock the heck out of you.
I might not even notice. I'm like lecturing and looking at slides and like, oh, what you did here?
Well, look, I wouldn't. I was going to say I wouldn't do that to you, but maybe I would. I don't know. I wouldn't do that to you.
It would be funny.
All right. Well, great to have you back as always. Next up, we have Cesar from Ottawa in his red and black. Yes,
indeed.
How are you, my brother?
I'm very good, brother. Hello, sister. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be back in Ottawa, of course. I am not accidentally wearing red and black to represent the Ottawa CFL football team.
The Red Blacks.
The Red Blacks. Very coincidental, but this is Echo, the brand. I'm not giving them publicity, but I am very well known to support my old school hip hop, mid 90s. Like I put it, 94 from Snoop. When a teenager, as I am, discovered hip hop. Wu-Tang made me love it. Up to 2004 with 50 Cent. And then after that, I became old. That's the best and kindest way I can put it, without throwing too much criticism at what today is called hip hop. Some exception, of course, and I know there is some good one, but let me just say, you come in my car, like today, it was Exhibit, Eazy-E. Exactly. There's an amazing track, a remix that was actually made of Get You Walk On with Exhibit, Tupac, and Eazy-E.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good to have you, and family is good?
Family is good. Number one job, being a father, mixed with number two job, being a husband. So I'm very happy about that, while at the same time advancing on addressing the issues of society concerning our people, but also, this whole equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And, every week running into some very odd situations, if I can put it that way, from the Black community, but also the non-Black communities, but always advancing as my mentors behind me, my heroes, our heroes.
Excellent. And today we have a special guest. He's been on Black Canada Talking before on his own, and myself and this gentleman hosts a Monday and Friday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 a.m. Pacific, something called The Morning Vibe, where we chop it up. We also amplify and have other Black Canadians. We profile them. So welcome to the roundtable, Mr. Ryan Knight.
Much appreciated. Make sure I'm not muted. Good to see everyone. Dr. L. Jones and Cesar. Much appreciated.
Ryan, can you introduce yourself to the audience that may not know you?
For sure. Yes. So Ryan Knight, I'm one of the co-founders of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. We work with entrepreneurs of African and Caribbean heritage to figure out what stage in business they're in right now and help them create a blueprint to exponentially grow their companies. I'm also an entrepreneur myself. I run a social enterprise called Detailing Nights. So we provide waterless mobile car cleaning. We go to people's houses or their offices, clean their car on the spot without using water and using our eco-friendly plant-based cleaning supplies. And I always like to give a shout out to our youth entrepreneurs. We're in the fall season where they work after school and on weekends. So shout out to Taj, Torian, and Nathan doing hard work this weekend. So always like to big them up. And I don't have my Detailing Night shirts here. I'm not even repping green. I feel embarrassed not to be in my colors, but happy to be on Black Canada Talking, and always next to you, Dr. Vibe. Appreciate it.
Humbled and really good to have you. So let's get after it. I asked for some topics from the panel ahead of time. We're going to land on two main conversation pieces today. Of course, Cesar wanted to talk about Black Canadians and their pushback of the vax issue. And then in the second half, we're going to talk about the ongoing journey of an organization called FACE. And Ryan Knight was in an article this week on buyblacks.com. We'll get to that a little later. But Cesar, I want you to take the lead. And also, I know, El, you want to add another component of the vax conversation involving Leslyn Lewis. So, Cesar, I'll let you take the lead and we'll continue from there. Go ahead, Cesar.
Thank you very much, brother. So, look, we've talked about COVID. We've talked about the reaction of the Black community here in Canada, in the US, but beyond that as well. We can think about COVID is actually even killing in Haiti. It's killing as well in Africa. It's killing as well in Brazil. I am absolutely pro-vaccine. That is not even a debate for me. It may surprise some people, but I would not be alive without vaccines, vaccines by white doctors. I was that child, that African child who had a a rare disease where, how do you call that? My throat reached my stomach. I had a sack of eggs.
Wow.
I was treated at Louis Pasteur. I was treated in Africa, but it was notably a reason for my father to take me to France, my health reasons. When I say that, I don't want to play on anyone's emotions. I am Black and a Pan-Africanist first. You can always count on me to criticize government, especially Western governments. You can always count on me to criticize institutions, even in my function as a director, a regional director on equity, diversity, and inclusivity in the government. You can always count on me to criticize, but more importantly, you can always count on me to be fair. And when I say fair, allow me to notably explain. As Black people, yes, we should always be careful regarding such things as vaccines. We have a history of having been used as guinea pigs, having been killed by the very institutions, the white institutions, if I dare to be blunt, that have claimed to be about health and that have used our bodies and our people for experimentations. Whether we're talking about gynecology, Marion Sims, are we talking about the Tuskegee experiment, etc., etc. However, we are facing a global pandemic where Black people are disproportionately affected. As I'm talking, on one side, I hear those in our community, and I have to be careful here. I'm not putting everyone in the same basket. There are some people who are rightfully in doubt and fear regarding a vaccine, and there are those who are fundamentally anti-vaccines. A big part of the problem is that Black people are being disproportionately affected by this vaccine. Yes, because of systemic racism, making it that we're more likely to be frontline workers, aka more exposed. But at the end of the day, whether you look in Canada, notably Toronto, or in the US, notably in Brazil, and if I give the example, there are parts of Africa, like in Uganda, that I mentioned before, where our Black people are dying of COVID. Just 2 weeks ago, I had an aunt. I was not close to her, so if anyone wants to know, she died of COVID. Our own brother here on the panel, Warren Clark, had talked about his own daughter who had COVID. It's not Sarah Onyengo is absolutely an advocate of getting vaccinated. I absolutely understand the fear and doubts. But the vast majority of our people, the vast majority of our people who are getting vaccinated have zero second effects, after effects from the vaccine. And as such, the vaccine is still being proven to be the best preventer of worse effects from COVID. I'm just trying to let our people know that, especially as now we're having nurses and people losing employment because they want to be rebels without a cause. That's really what I'm calling it. Like, there comes a point when doubts and suspicions have to be confronted by the fact that behind these vaccines, we actually have Black professionals, researchers, and doctors who are behind it. This is not some white supremacy, 1% Bill Gates and the Illuminatis, as some Black people do mention. I'm not saying this because I work in the government, as others have talked about me. I'm sorry, it's kind of ridiculous. Even more ridiculous when I'm like, I have activists, notably in Brazil, who are showing me the figures, how it's destroying the communities. You know how crazy it is when I have white people that I know in Africa who are sharing to me how COVID is killing Black people in Africa. They're not making it up. They're working with Black activists on the ground. I'm not there. I didn't come talking about Uganda out of nowhere. I'm not even talking about Cameroon, where I'm born. But even in Cameroon, in an extended family members, my own baby sister in France, this is not in Africa, in France, in Paris, she had COVID. So absolutely, I think we have to take COVID vaccination more seriously. The impact, notably what is called long COVID. I have chronic health issues. I don't wear glasses to be cool. I wear glasses because I lose my eyesight in each eye because of any light. Any light. The nights in the nightclub are enough for me to go blind. There are plenty of people to be to testify to this. It's chronic health issues. So despite my chronic health issues, I checked with my doctor. We went through the ingredients of the vaccine. He told me you will have zero problem. I was totally fine. Yes, some people can and will have after effects. Guess what? Some people even die of taking Tylenol. So I just want our people to really take this seriously, because I feel bad when some of the Black people that I know are very anti-vaccines, they barely make $50,000 a year. They are barely into entry-level position where they've been for 10, 15 years. What do you think will happen when they're forced to get vaccinated, and if they decide to remain stubborn, they lose their job? I'm seeing long-term consequences of impacting our Black families far more than taking a vaccine, where, FYI, in terms of the world, if we look at raw numbers, we are disproportionately affected. But it's not Black people who are dying the most. When you look at Italy, France, the USA, China, South Korea, India, when we look at raw number, it's overwhelmingly non-Blacks who are dying. So this plot is not some depopulation or killing Black people. We need to do our part. We need to save our people. That's why those activists in Brazil, in Uganda, that's what they're telling me. They're like, please let people know. I'm not in Brazil. I'm not in Uganda. I can only talk about my sister. I can only talk about this aunt. I can only confirm, because I know Warren about his daughter. I can only talk about the people around me. But there are thousands and thousands who are literally dying, and I'm being sent videos. I'm trying to raise awareness while respecting each and every person, but eventually one's person choice has far more consequences upon many others. Allow me to stop there for now so that my brother and sister also get to react.
No problem. Thank you for a great start to the conversation. Elle, your thoughts, and I know you want to bring in Leslie and Lewis into this too, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll bring that up at the end. So just to build off what Cesar was saying, I think, first of all, we need to differentiate between the reasons why Black people are scared of vaccine mandates or the vaccine, which is tied to obviously our historical relationship to government and the healthcare system, as opposed to the white supremacist intersection with the vaccine anti-vax movement that we're seeing all over the place, right? So there's obviously like one reason why the PPC got so many votes in this election, like 6% of the vote up from like 1%, is because they were able to really tap into this anti-vax thing, like this whole anti-vax movement. And it very much crosses with white supremacy. That is just undeniable when you look at who's out protesting, when you look at the narratives. Anti-vaccination discourse and white supremacy go hand in hand. And that's really important for us to understand, first of all, because then a lot of Black people who are coming at it from a completely different perspective. Black people are saying we don't trust the vaccine because there's a history of governments experimenting on us, because we go to the doctor and we know doctors are racist, so we can't trust health information. But then that is being weaponized and used by what is a white supremacist, white nationalist movement in the most cases, and crosses there to then use Black people. So an example is all these NBA players, right? So Kyrie Irving, for example, is not playing for the Nets right now because he's refusing. He doesn't like the idea of the mandates. And there is a reason behind it. Like, I agree that it's frightening. I'm not hot on this notion of like people logging and tracking us, right? We know where that goes for Black people. So every time I go to a restaurant, every time I enter a building, you know, when I went to the library yesterday, I do think Black people are right to be concerned about like what is happening to that information and that data. We already had this fight with street checks, right? Where we were like, but what happens to the data when you survey us? So I think we do need to be asking questions of like, when you're making these lists and we have to give our email and our phone number and our whereabouts, like what is happening to that? And like Black people are right to question that. I think we're right to have concerns, but we should be getting vaccinated. So the concern isn't I'm not going to get vaccinated. I think we are right to say like what happens is information. If there's vaccine passports, we know Black people may be targeted from that information. We know there's a history of selling our information to law enforcement. These are not ridiculous questions, but we should not compromise our health and public health and the health of our communities in some kind of misguided response to that, right? Like we can get the vaccine and also say, I'm not sure I like this notion of the government like having my data in particular ways. And so we've seen people raise this, but then also play into the anti-vax part. So Kyrie Irving, Andrew Wiggins, who like was refusing to get the vaccine and tried to get a religious exemption, and then of course ended up getting it because it was that or playing. But Kyrie Irving right now has said that he's like not playing. And what you've seen is all these like racist Republicans that can't stand when Black people kneel, right? So when Black people take a political stance and kneel for the national anthem, that's disgusting. Why don't you just play sports? But when Black people are like, well, I don't want to get the vaccine, suddenly they're heroes of the right wing and they're talking about freedom. So it's funny that when our freedom is freedom from policing and freedom from state violence, you know, we're too woke. But when the minute you buy into like these limited white ideas of freedom, these people are being held up as basically these tools of like a very racist movement. And that's not to say again that Kyrie Irving doesn't have an analysis. He's a very intelligent person. Like he has an analysis of what he's talking about. But I think where it becomes misguided is like, what are you sacrificing yourself, Kyrie Irving? Like what message are you sending to Black people that die of this disease so much higher than other people, or get, you know, like we die, we get infected, all because of the social causes of health that impact us due to poverty, due to like resource theft, due to the racist healthcare system, due to doctors who believe that we feel pain differently than other people, that we have thicker skin than other people, so needles don't go in our skin in the same way. Like, these are all things that like actual doctors believe. And so we have to be very careful about this. And of course, before I get to Leslyn Lewis, which plays off the NBA stuff, I think also, I mean, it's really frustrating to see, you know, like there was actually a protest maybe 3 weeks ago here, and it was like huge on Citadel Hill of the anti-vaxxers, and they like went into businesses and, you know, were basically harassing the servers and stuff, which they're allowed to do. Like let a Black person go to the club like wearing a t-shirt with like the sleeves too long or something, and oh, there's a dress code, right? Like they'll call the police to kick us out of a club because we're wearing a do-rag. But like white people can go into a restaurant and literally harass the serving staff and nothing happens to them as they're unmasked and bullying and harassing people. So that happened here. But I'm like, is this really your idea of what an imposition on your freedom is? Like, you understand that Black people can't move through borders. Like Black people are stuck in prison cells. Black people are stuck in housing where we're being controlled in terms of like what business you can have in your home. And I'm sure Ryan's going to raise some of these issues when we talk about the limitations of like business funding. You know, when you're telling Black women, you can't braid hair in your house. Like you can't braid hair if you're on social assistance without us taking your money out. You know, all these things that are like constantly policing and surveying us, which nobody cares about. And then a white person's like, oh my God, I have to show a piece of paper. Like the world is going to end, you know? And I'm like, you know, so we just see, and we have seen this throughout this pandemic, like just the sheer caucasity of whiteness, right? Like the minute they're asked to do anything for other people, it's like the world is going to end. How dare you? You can't ask me anything. Freedom. You know, I'm not going to get a vaccine. You can't tell me what to do. Like toddlers basically throwing a fit, which is exactly why it intersects with people who also think that it's somehow impacting their freedom if you don't shoot Black people or racially profile them, or like Black people getting jobs is impacting their freedom, or Black people talking about racism is impacting their freedom. So on a final note with that, somebody who was also, and we've talked about this on the show before. So the good thing about having what I think now we can call perhaps a long running show at this point is that we've had topics that we've talked about before, and like we kind of can follow that on our commentary. So I know Cesar had talked a lot when Leslyn Lewis was running for leadership of the Conservative Party. And Cesar, and so maybe after Ryan speaks, you might want to come back in on this too. Cesar spoke a lot about like, you know, not Yas Queening that, right? Like we don't need to like celebrate like every Black person's like, you know, actions. So we can both say, well, you know, Leslyn Lewis probably experiences racism and it's probably a very difficult path, and also be like, but I don't think I want a Black woman leading this party, right? So Cesar really talked about that. And so she's been engaging in a lot of this, like, you know, anti-vax stuff, particularly masked under the idea of like the vaccine passport. And what I thought was interesting is like in one of her tweets, so she starts talking about never again in history, I think she says, have children being used as shields. And I'm like, really? Not residential schools? Like not enslaved? Like I can think of a million times when Black and Indigenous kids have been used as shields for adults, but never has this happened in history. And then she goes on to talk about basically that like vaccine mandates and like using kids 9 to 12 to talk about vaccines. It's quite incoherent as a tweet, but essentially I'm trying to find it, so I'm not doing her disservice by paraphrasing her words because that's not good. So let me just pull it up. Okay, so she said, never have Canadian children been used as shields for adults. Pause. Parents question vaccinating kids 5 to 12 without long-term data, a low risk of fatality, and cautions echoed around the world when the treatment neither presents. And she goes on into a thread to basically say there's not evidence for vaccines. By the way, there's no evidence for using tasers on kids, but the conservatives don't have any problem with that. Tasers have never been tested on children because, like, obviously nobody in their right mind would be like, yeah, come like shoot electrical volts into my child. Yet, like, a third of tasers used in UK, for example, are against Black children. Just saying. So she goes on to this thread, and then Stockwell Day, who of course denied the existence of systemic racism in Canada, says, "Hope. History repeating? A Black woman letting a majority white male power structure know that she won't be told where to sit on COVID issues." And then, so he basically tries to use this discourse of like Black feminism, because now she's saying what he wants to say. So now it's okay for him to be like, oh yeah, you should listen to this Black woman. But when we were talking about George Floyd and systemic racism in Canada and racism in the RCMP, he was standing up and saying, there's no racism in Canada. It doesn't exist. But now we should listen to Black women, and it's white men and their vaccine mandates that, of course, telling her to sit, except Dr. Teresa Tam is a woman of color. So I don't know where he's going with this. So I'll pause there, but I think it's a good example of how you see the right wing conveniently adopting these narratives. We see this with Trudeau during the election, that people would use blackface as a gotcha. Like, you know, white conservatives were always posting memes of Trudeau in blackface and being like, this is your hero. And I'm like, but you guys like blackface. Like, Halloween's coming up. There'll be blackface incidents at all these universities, and you'll be the first to defend it and say that we're being hysterical and blackface is just a costume. And like, what about Vikings, right? Like, you'll be the first to say that. But, you know, when it's Trudeau, they're like, oh, well, he wore blackface. Don't you know he's racist and sexist? And this is another example, right? How now what we're seeing is conservatives love to adopt the discourse of race and sexism, but only when it fits like their own narrative. So we have to be very careful of this as well and understand how this is being weaponized by right-wing forces. I will stop talking. Ryan, I see you nodding. So.
Well, I don't know if I feel good or bad for Ryan after the powerhouse introduction.
I feel like I'm half on the show, but half just in the audience observing, because this is like, I'm just loving the conversation. But to touch on something that Elle said around, do we remember when Walmart started checking everybody's bags? And it was a complete outright, like, white people lost their mind. The Walmart had to stop. They're like, okay, sorry, we'll pull that back. And really the biggest question that we're having, and it was touched by Cesar and Dr. L, is around that infrastructure and trust of the institutions. And what I want to really add to the conversation is around us not focusing on building our own infrastructure. I talked to a gentleman that runs a biochemical company, and he said if he got the right funding, he would have been able to create a vaccine that could have been one of the mainstream vaccines. I think that would have eliminated that trust piece, where if a Black scientist, Black-owned company is now creating the vaccine that's on par with Pfizer and Moderna and all the rest, we can now look at that and say, okay, you know what? We don't trust y'all, but we trust us, and we can go there. And then a lot more of the Black community would have gotten the vaccine and not use just the distrust. And really it's just spotlighting how much the Black community does not trust these oppressors that, again, like Cesar was saying, we have so much evidence like to back up our claims of why we do not trust the institutions. But then, like Elle was saying as well, that isn't an excuse to now put your health in risk. And I want to channel my wife, who's a frontline worker, and she works in hospitals as a nurse, a registered nurse. And she sees firsthand the type of death and devastation that's happening. And she's seeing it more with like obese. And then when it started impacting pregnant women and people that are put in the ICU, come in walking and then are incubated or intubated, and really quickly. And she had never seen things like this before. And then so many people dying. And like Cesar was saying, now it's affecting the Black community a lot more because we're a lot more frontline workers. The challenge against trusting the institution when now we're going to get sick, you have to do one of two things. You can either say, you know what, I believe the conspiracies and I know they're against us and I'm not going to take this vaccine. But you have to be very, very careful about your health. You can't knock the thing that's supposed to protect your health and then go out and be at Scotia Center or going to parties and just being at risk of getting sick, you might have to think about a different career. And again, they're actually going to force you out if you're not getting this mandatory vaccine. And that's where it gets into kind of the business side of it. Now we're saying it's mandatory, and the first people that are going to lose their jobs are the ones living week to week, paycheck to paycheck. It's not a choice that is really, you're really left with no choice but to comply. And that's where, if we don't build our own infrastructure, and if we don't use this time now to really figure out what infrastructure pieces are missing, if we look at the healthcare vertical, we don't have our own hospitals. We don't even have really a good amount of our own walk-in clinics and healthcare centers. We haven't created our own vaccine, so we have to comply with what exists if it's going to help our health. Otherwise, we're in the same situation that we were in back in the 60s or 50s, where they can tell us any story and we have no defense against whatever they give us. We have to create our own infrastructure, or else we're at their mercy.
All right. Anyone want to make it? Cesar, go ahead. Go ahead, man.
If I can I'm going to come on many of the points that were made. We have to understand that for the vast majority of our Black people who are seemingly anti-vaxxers, I don't want to say conspiracy theorists in terms of such a blanket word that some people can take offensively. There's a place for doubts and criticism, and there is a place where it becomes irrational. For many of our people, they will buy into anything and everything as long as it sounds anti-white. For many of our people, one of the things that happen, the issue is not even so much the vaccine. It's the system, the structure of power. Even if you provide to them the facts that there are Black researchers behind the vaccines, even if you explain to them how the vaccine didn't just start being created last year in 2020, but it goes to SARS about 20 years ago. Even if you provide the articles, even if I use the analogy of the condom and the seat belt, even if I do explain before it was law, like whether it be in California or against stealthing for removal without consent, or whether it be seatbelts being mandatory in the 60s and 70s, but it was actually created and used before and proven to save lives before testing on training dummies. This is part of what I would honestly call the miseducation, allow me not to say the N-word, the miseducation of Black people, where systemic racism impacting us to a point where, for too many of us, distrust lead to death by ignorance, death by conviction that to not do anything is better than to do something. That is a very dangerous logic. You basically trap yourself in your own mind. It's very psychological. We are hurting. We are hurting despite the facts that the studies are there regarding our communities. You cannot on one side accept that COVID kills disproportionately Black people, and at the same time recognize that yes, there is COVID, COVID kills, yes, there is a vaccine, yes, the vaccine helps, and justify rationally and emotionally that you won't take it, no matter how you claim to have a problem with vaccine mandates or vaccine passports. The other thing I like to say, and I know Al meant it absolutely in the greatest of ways, but I'm very disappointed in Kyrie Irving. When I say disappointed, he's not intelligent. One of my favorite point guards reveals himself on matters of knowledge. I don't want to play that stereotype of the Black athlete who is dumb, but he's already a flat earther. He believes the earth is flat. But on COVID, his attitude is being called out by even other basketball players for being dangerous, giving some type of becoming some type of leader to some of our black people who are being anti-vaxxers. And yet he doesn't have a point. We honestly have to call him out regarding that, because he is a popular, rich, and famous point guard worth $90 million. His refusal to get vaccinated will hurt him a lot less than too many of our people who don't even make $50,000 a year and who are living paycheck by paycheck.
Yeah, and now he's their spokesperson, right?
And now he's apparently the spokesperson. And it really bothers me when some black people, too many black people, try to compare him to Muhammad Ali. Absolutely false comparison. And when some of our black people try to compare resisting vaccine to segregation. This is why it's important to teach history and critical thinking to our black people. We cannot compare this COVID situation right now to segregation. We cannot compare Kyrie Irving to Muhammad Ali. The problem is that too many of our people, they want to make a choice of being in the resistance against the system, but they don't want to accept the consequences. I say to many people, I turned down a $90 an hour job in my mid-20s because the place was racist. It was a nightclub. $90 an hour. So last but not least, regarding Leslie Lewis, thank you, Al. It goes back to what I was saying. Liberals will do it, of course, but conservatives will do it even more openly. So if we talk in the U.S. context, liberals as Democrats will do it, using black people for their gains. Conservative Republicans will do it even more and more hypocritically. This is the same conservative, in terms of like Leslie Lewis, basically being a parrot to what those white leaders, conservative leaders in a false stand against the vaccine, because the vast majority of them will get vaccinated. We know that. But in a false stand for her as a black person, and I hate to say it, notably as a woman, to keep being legitimate in the boys' club, she has to say louder what they're all saying, and she will be used, and when she will stop being useful, she will be thrown away. Let us not forget, this is the same type of conservative mindset that I'm just taking us on another tangent, but very similar. In the US, there's an entire debate regarding critical race theory and cancel culture. And we have former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice coming out and saying she opposes critical race theory because she doesn't want white kids to be made feel bad because they're white. Condoleezza, who asked you? Where did you come out from in order to come say this in support of white supremacy being held? Not cancel culture. I don't support cancel culture. I support what's called accountability culture. And that requires to hold to accountability the same white institutions, and notably conservative institutions, that ultimately end up killing our people. End up killing our people in false adherence. Oh, now Stockwell this supports Leslie Lewis. Watch tomorrow if Leslie Lewis dares to say that systemic racism exists in Canada. You'll see the turnaround he'll do. Same as all the black conservatives. So allow me to just stop there, but please, my black people, our people are dying. I have the videos. I shared the videos of a hospital. I don't remember if it was in Jamaica. I think it was in Jamaica, actually. Our black people are dying of COVID. It is not some conspiracy. You're not going to tell me my aunt in Cameroon died of COVID, my sister in France had COVID, and then after that she went to get vaccinated. And we have our own brother, Warren Clark, who talked about his own daughter. Come on, it becomes a little bit too many people that we can connect directly with COVID.
And just real quick, sorry, I love a good conspiracy theory. I am not anti that, hey, I believe everything that is being fed. But with conspiracy theories, it gets to a point where you have to ask yourself, if this is true, what, like me fighting against it now, how am I going to live my life? If you do not believe that we went to the moon, how are you going to change your life knowing that it was fake? If you think the earth is flat, how is it going to change your life thinking that the earth is not round? But when we ask ourselves, if you do not believe in this vaccine, the alternative is you're more prone to get sick. And like Cesar is saying, you can really get sick and die. Are you willing to take that risk to believe that Bill Gates or whoever's in charge has created this massive world like pandemic to get a vaccine in your arm to try? I'm just, hey, I got my shots. I'm just like, listen, if this is their play, I give them the slow clap and I say, well done, gentlemen. You got me double jab. If I'm gonna get superpowers from this thing and you can track me, I submit. But we have to pick our battles sometimes.
Right now in Canada, the superpower you will get from being double vaccinated is called you keep your job.
And
That is a superpower in an incoming economic recession.
And of
Go
course,
ahead, Elle.
if they want to track us, like that doesn't stop people from walking around with their Apple phones and like using social media, which is actually started to track us. Facebook startup funds were like partially given by the CIA. So just so you know, I mean, obviously all of this, and as we know from Cambridge Analytics, like there's a long history of our social media, our online activity. So you won't get a vaccine, but you'll use Twitter. Like, you know, it's actually those companies.
And Google Maps, listen.
You know, like,
oh man,
you're watching Netflix. You have a driver license. You are part of the system. Unless you're born, lived, and died in the woods, drinking water from the river, and living in like an Ewok from Star Wars in the tree, you are part of the system. You can be found.
I want to go back to this question. What's my thoughts on the current 5 Black Liberal MPs in Parliament? I'm not going to give personal thoughts. I think, you know, I'm not going to do like a roast. In case you're wondering, am I a liberal? I'm not. I'm very open about this. I am so far to the left. I mean, I'm barely even, you know, on the map when that comes up. But my sort of assessment of any politician is what you're advocating for and doing directed at the poorest and most powerless Black people. If it's not, I'm not interested. So I'm not into the discourse on Blackness that presents, and I say this as like an elite Black, like I'm a professor, you know, but I do not think that the main outcome from 2020 should be more professors getting jobs. Like the main outcome has to be, are our people still living in housing? Why are we still in prisons? Why are our Black migrants still facing deportation? Like, why do we not have a path to citizenship? Why are so many Black women living in poverty? These are the questions that I want our Black caucus to take up. Now, in the past, once in a while, they have actually responded when I've sent things and done things. But my vast experience of most politicians, Black or white, is that there is, of course, no engagement with those actual issues. That people, you know, if an elite person or a person with a title, something happens to them, everyone will be on Twitter, hashtag I stand with. But the hundreds of thousands of Black people that face like injustice every single day, nobody fights for them. I think if you are Black in Parliament and then you're saying I'm in the Black caucus and I'm Black and I stand for Blackness, you should be asking yourself every day, what I'm doing and the policies I'm passing, things I'm advocating for, how are they going to make the lives, not of a few percentage of us, but all of us better? And if I'm not hearing you talking about prisons and pushing to get our people out of prison and pushing against things like gang regulations and, you know, the Minister of Public Safety, who you should all be pushing back on. I don't care if he's your colleague, he's anti-Black. You know, if you're not pushing back on border patrol, if you're not pushing back on the war on drugs, if you're not pushing back on our our education, if you're not pushing back on these things, like, then I don't see how it's relevant to me. So whatever party you're in, I expect you to take up the causes, the risky causes, the causes that will get you like white people, you know, like Maxime Bernier is going to come for you, right? But you have to speak up about these things. And if you can't and won't, I don't have much respect for that, because I have, you know, sacrificed in my life to speak up about these things. I know it's hard. I know what the cost is, and we have to do it anyway. So I'm at the point in my life where if I don't have that record from you, then miss me, you know, basically. Like, I'm just not going to hold you up and praise you. Like, now there are mediocre white people, so I'm not going to say that your work, like, white people don't advocate for us. White people are mediocre. They're unintelligent. These things are all true. So I'm not going to suggest that Black people are like worse than that. I'm just saying, if your being in the universe is like, I'm Black, speaking about racism cannot just speak about it as it impacts you personally. It has to speak about how it impacts Black people under capitalism. So that's my little lecture. Very quickly, too, I'll just raise one.
Okay, take your time. Take your time.
Separate issue, but I don't know. I meant to bring up this story that the anti-Semitism Secretariat has been made permanent. I don't know if people saw this. So Erwin Kotler has been made into a permanent position. So this is to address anti-Semitism in Canada. Disturbingly, part of it is to install the IRHA definition of anti-Semitism, of which 7 of 11 examples of criticism of Israel. So that's worrisome. But of course, many people have talked about why is there no anti-Black secretariat and there's no secretariat for anti-Muslim, even though, of course, the vast majority of hate crimes are actually on like Black people, state violence against Black people.
That's so true. When I was reading the mandate letters and I'm seeing, there's a Ministry of Indigenous Affairs and no Ministry of Black Affairs. You start wondering something's missing if they're serious about change, right?
Yeah, so I just raised that. And then really briefly before we move into serious topics, because I know Ryan, I was like speed reading your article. I hadn't seen it. Good stuff. Pettiness on the Jamaican side. This was a headline in the Jamaica Observer. Jamaica dead last like Shikari in helping disabled.
Oh, God.
Like, they will not get over this. Like, what did she do? And it's an article about how like there isn't enough support in Jamaica for the rights of people with disabilities, which is really important. Let's not gloss over that. But then this is in the article. I just have to read this to you because this is Black people to a T. I was deceased reading this. So it's supposed to be an article about like Jamaicans with disabilities. And the quote is, when it comes to looking after the business class, we have fast lane. But when it comes to people with disabilities, we are like Shikari, dead last. Now the article goes on a digression. His reference to American track and field sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson, who after much hype fizzled to place 9th in the much anticipated women's 100 meters at the Prefontaine Classic in Eugene, Oregon. No, it keeps going. That race was a repeat of the Jamaican 100-meter sweep at the Tokyo Olympics, from which Richardson was excluded for testing positive for marijuana. And then they continue with the article. I'm like, that is so petty. Make an observer for you, everybody. Just a moment of levity, Black people.
Oh, my goodness. Well, so I'm going to ask the panel. Usually we finish at the top of the hour. You folks have already almost used up the time. Are we good to go for a few minutes past the top of the hour?
Yeah, I want to hear Ryan's take. So Ryan's
okay, now
let's
so before we get to that, okay, so we can go. I just want. There's a lot of comments here, and unfortunately, we're not going to be. Well, there's just there's a lot of comments here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask this specific question for Ryan. Jerry has here, how will the vaccine mandates impact Black people in the workplace? And because you run a business organization, what impact do you see this is going to have for Blacks in the workplace? And if Cesar and I want to add on, sure, but I wanted to have Ryan give his take first.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we talk about ratios, because on one side, you'll hear Sick Kids Hospital, 157 people sent home without pay. And one person will be like, wow, that's a lot of people. And then you look at the grand scheme of things, and there's like tens of thousands of employees there. And other people are like, that's really not a lot. So they're calculating how much of their workforce will they lose and still be able to adhere to government mandates. So right now, and they haven't said how many of that 157 were Black employees. Like, are they, if it's a big number, and like Cesar was saying, it's impacting the Black community more, then we have to really pay attention. But if it's across the board, that calculation is already made. They have said, we will do mandatory vaccinations, and whoever does not comply, we can do without you. So those people that are working week to week, kind of hand to mouth, check to check, they don't have any bandwidth to make that decision to say, I'm not going into work and I'm gonna just live off my savings. So I'm predicting that a lot of people that may be really against the vaccination and are against the mandate, when they miss that first check, they're gonna go get their vaccine. So I don't see a long-term effect economically. I feel like there's enough people that are vaccinated that the economy will move forward without you. So if that's your stance, and hey, shout out to like colleagues of mine, shout out to Pharaoh with One Full Circle that is creating an actual, they have land in Montreal or in Quebec to move and live. If you are against the system and you want to be off the grid, that is an option. So don't feel like you're trapped in whatever's being fed to you. You have the option. I think Cesar said it. If you want to go live by the river and live off the land and get off the grid, you could do that. But the economy, it's made its stance. And if you either fall in line or you don't.
Okay. Just want to put there's a question here from Jerry. How popular is the Conservative Party within the Black community? We won't get to that today. And why do most Black people vote for the Liberals? Again, we'll get back to that today. What I would suggest, Jerry, is if you go to the Dr. Vibe show and if you take a look at the conversation we had on the night of the federal election, I think you would get a really, really good deep dive in regards to that. And periodically through our conversations of Black Canada Talking, that subject comes up, but I won't get into a deep dive today, but I will refer you to that conversation we had the night of the federal election. And one last thing, if our producer could just put up the flyer that I sent him, I'm actually co-hosting a conversation about the vax or I say the jab, or people vax, jab, whatever. So if the producer could just put it up quickly, yeah, there it is. Black Vax Convo, real talk on conversation, vaccinations in the Black community. And I'm co-hosting it. It is October 28th, this Thursday, from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be broadcast on the Dr. Vibe Facebook page and YouTube page. So we have some panelists there. We have naturopaths. We have a Black lawyer, Black naturopath, etc. And please feel free to dial in. I'm going to be sending it out to all my communities. We want everyone's participation on it. Okay, we're done part one. Now, one of the reasons I love to have Ryan Knight on this platform. Why are you shaking your head, Ryan? Why are you shaking your head? Okay, for those,
I'm just listening. Listening.
Okay, well, you're going to be talking about a minute or less. Ryan, as you know, for people watch, he's very much involved in the business community. For those who haven't had their head in the sand, there is an organization out there called FACE, Federation of African. Can't remember the rest.
Canadian Economics.
Mm-hmm. Long story short, they were given a large amount of money from the federal government to help administer loan programs for Black Canadian entrepreneurs. How long ago was this, Ryan?
So the announcement of the loan program was done September 2020, and then FACE was formed February 2021, and they launched their applications May of this year. Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna just say a few more things, and there was an art. Actually, if the producer can put up the article, there is an article that appeared in BuyBlacks.com for those who want to know what's going on in Black Canada. BuyBlacks.com is the most viewed African Canadian website in the world. Number one, it is run by Roger and Camille Dundas, personal friends of mine and mentors of mine. You see the title of the article if you're seeing this on screen or you're listening audio, the Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund continues to be marred by controversies. So with that lead in, Mr. Ryan was one of the people interviewed in this article. So we have spoken about this loan fund periodically throughout the last few months, but now we have someone who is not only a business person, who's not only a person who's applied for the loan, and also who's still waiting to get an answer, but also who knows the deep dive of it. So Ryan, you know what? I'll follow up at the end with Sheridan's comment about the healthcare workers, because that'd be a total segue off. But Ryan, give us what your experience is, what you shared in the article, and your thoughts about what's going on with FACE.
Yeah, and let me preface it by saying a lot of people think I'm against FACE, and I am not. But the one piece of advice I would give them, don't give people ammunition to use against you. So now I can only speak to my experience. I can let you know the timelines, and then you can make your own decisions if you're applying for a loan. So as I mentioned, the Black Entrepreneurship Program, that was a federal program, was launched in September of 2020, September 9th to be exact. And that program had three components. So the Ecosystem Fund, the Loan Program, and the Knowledge Hub. So the Ecosystem Fund, ACBN, the Afro-Caribbean Business Network, we're actually part of the ecosystem. So we got funded to support entrepreneurs that are part of this Black program, Black Entrepreneurship Program. So the loan fund actually came out first. So in May of 2021, this year, they announced applications are now being accepted. The loan fund is going to be managed by Face. So Face got $30 million to manage, $3 million in admin to oversee the entire program. And the BDC came on board to administer 180 million at first. I think it went up to like 220. So the loan program, you apply through Face, and if it's under 100,000, Face administers it. If it's over 100,000, it goes to BDC. If it's under 25,000, it goes to a credit union like Alterna Savings or Van City in BC. So to back up just a little bit, when the announcement was first made, the big banks were at the table. So CIBC, TD, RBC, National Bank, BMO, Scotia, they were part of the announcement. And when you replay Trudeau's words, you'll hear directly he said, the federal government has partnered with Canadian banks to create the Black Entrepreneurship Loan Program. When it was announced in May 31st, 2021, the banks were not in the announcement. It was said that the banks weren't ready, so BDC stepped in and they became the loan partner, and the banks are going to be in phase 2. So if you've been watching the news, RBC has created their own Black Entrepreneurship Loan Program, and not the Futurepreneur one, their own specific Black Entrepreneurship Loan Program that you can get up to $250,000. And yeah, pretty much you apply through RBC now. So RBC has really severed ties with Face, at least on the surface. Nobody will tell you why. Nobody will tell me why. Hey, CIBC, TD, Scotia, it seems like they're going to be next because they have not come back to the table with Face. So all that to say, as an entrepreneur, I see the Face loan. I say I've been following since the beginning. Our organization was actually part of doing some of the research to say, hey, what do Black entrepreneurs need? Even though a lot of our recommendations were ignored, I'm still a big proponent on having a better alternative for getting capital for Black entrepreneurs. So the day it came out, I applied May 31st, submitted all my documents. There actually wasn't a submit button. I sent them an email. I said, hey, you're missing a submit button. They added it in. I submitted my application. So now 5 months later, I get an email or I get a call saying, oh, you're missing some documents. I said, hey, I'll check. On the phone, I said, they're there. She checked again. She's like, oh, yes, it is there. I'll send your stuff to the loan officer. A month after that, I get a call from the loan officer that says, oh, we need additional documents. Can you put your resume and your business plan? Can you send us your T1? Can you do a breakdown of what you're going to use the funds for? It's like, no problem. So that's kind of where it is today. I submitted those. They said 10 business days, you're going to get a response. So I'm thinking to myself, so remember, this is before the RBC created their own loan. I was at RBC depositing a check. I said, let me see if I can talk to somebody. I said, can I make an appointment with an advisor? She said, sure thing. He's available at 3:30. This was in the morning. I came back, sat down, said, what can you offer me? I'm a business owner. We're looking to expand. And she said, so she called, I guess, the business department. They said, oh, what we would do is the Canada Small Business Loan Program. She broke it down, all the things. She said, based on what you're looking for, you would get approved for 100,000. I said, all right, send me the email with the list of stuff to do. So within, I'll say a day. So I came into the bank in the morning. By the afternoon, I knew what I needed and I was able to submit that. But now they launched a new program. So I'm going to go for that program first. But the process, and yes, hey, 100% RBC has more infrastructure. They've been banking for over a century. So now why wouldn't Face lean on the infrastructure that exists if the banks are involved? Instead, they're trying to do things on their own. And now we're seeing that they have 20,000 people that signed up for their portal. They don't have the manpower to do the work. So why aren't they asking for help? I can't answer that question because we are part of the ecosystem and they're not sending entrepreneurs to us to help them get ready to get this loan. And this is just my experience. One, as a service provider, and two, as an entrepreneur that applied. And that's where people will read the article and they'll be like, "Oh, why you dogging face? Why don't you like what they're doing?" I am not a fan of bad project management. I have seen from the beginning, this thing has not been managed properly. They're fully resourced, or did they not get the money? And then we have to call out the government because they were supposed to get 3 million. If they didn't get the money, clearly they can't execute. If they did get the money, whoever's in charge isn't doing a good job. And I would say that to any business owner that I sit down with and we try to figure out how to make their business better. If you have bad systems, I'm going to point that out to you and help you fix them. If I point it out to you and you don't want to fix it, all I can do is write articles and be interviewed and say what I see. I can't do anything more than that if you don't want the help. So that's kind of the over. And this, so another, I've heard like, oh, it's because you haven't gotten approved yet that, you know, you're dogging face. Listen, every phone call that I get about face from people that have applied, I have not gotten one phone call that was a positive experience. I've reached out to Kemba Williams that was able to get approved, and her process was a lot better. She is versed in, you know, doing mortgages and was able to go through the process. She's actually offered to help the community and say, listen, I will do workshops and help you with the process, but not, and this actually goes to something that Elle was saying. If your program isn't going to support the most vulnerable of the population that the program was built for, it was built for Black entrepreneurs that are having trouble accessing capital at these banks that have a history of systemic racism, then what is the program for? If it's only going to help the 5% of entrepreneurs that are totally on point with their business plan, cash flow, they have collateral, they own a home, they have property, then those entrepreneurs can go into banks and typically get funding. The rest of the 95%, this program isn't helping. So I'm struggling with what the purpose of it is. And it's tough to get a straight answer or for them to be transparent. I apologize. I know I've been talking for a while, but I'm trying to give like as much of the overview of what I've experienced in this whole, and I'm such a fan of the concept. This is what kills me. I want us to be able to create our own infrastructure. Face is not, they're not interested in creating our own banking system. All they want to do is manage the government's funds, and they're not even doing a good job of that. That's just facts. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Who would like to add on to that? And I'm glad that we have someone who's actually been exposed, who's actually gone through, is going through the process. One last thing before either Elle or Cesar jump in. Ryan, to the best of your knowledge, how many?
I know what you're gonna ask.
How many entrepreneurs right now are in limbo?
Oh man! So if I go by what I see, we know for sure 2 entrepreneurs got funding. So they had 20,000 sign on to their portal, so create accounts. At last, they put out 14,000 that started their applications. And then they said about 1,200 had finished their applications. So if we say 1,200 out of the 20,000 were able to just get to the finish line and submit, those 1,200 are now being sent to the loan review committee or the loan officer. And out of those 1,200, we've only heard of 2 that have gotten funding since May.
Elle, what do you got to say about this one? You're on mute, Elle.
I'm looking at the article, Ryan, and I also wanted you to say about your point that you made in the article about the Black Community-Owned Credit Union and some of those recommendations.
Right. So what we recommended is they've now allocated, let's say it's a $300 million pot, some of it's bank, some of it's government. But with the government side, they're actually putting up $30 million for this loan program. to create our own Black focused credit union, it would cost about $15 million in, I'll call it startup capital. So that is money that has to be kind of deposited or invested into the bank, and then they would add on deposits to that. So if they took the 30 million, took 15 million of it for us to be able to create our own infrastructure, and then the banks, we would be able to lend off of the money that they're putting towards the program, the credit union would then become an entity that is leveraging the money that the government has said is for the Black community. So right now, if you look at what the program looks like, so $30 million, let's say Face gets that 30 million, or 33 million. What bank are they putting it in? They won't tell you, but I can guess. It's not a Black-owned bank, 100%. And it's probably one of the big five, TD, RBC, CIBC. So when they deposit that money into one of these banks, who's collecting the interest? Who's able to loan off of that money? The banks are. So who's really benefiting? Not the Black community. So now that's what we're left with. And when we propose other ways that would actually have a longer, more impactful ripple effect, they dismiss it. They're like, no, we can't do that with the money. The government says we can only do X. So who's really in charge? Are they just a branch of the government that the government says, hey, do X, Y, and Z, and they can only do that? Or are they representing the Black community where we're saying there should be a grant component to it? You should actually use some of the money to create our own credit union so we'd have infrastructure, but they can't do that.
Okay. The article's back on the screen. You can take it off, producer, please, and thank you. Cesar, do you have any comments? And I'm going to read some comments from one of our audience. Watch, Cesar, when you're laughing like that and you're tugging on your neck, I'm going, oh boy.
I have a lot of comments. It makes me very upset. It just goes back to what we were talking months ago. And I mean, this actually connects to the entire conversation we've been having. Why do Black people distrust the government, distrust the system? It's things like this. It's a lack of innovation. It's a great concept that starts, that sounds so Black empowering, that sounds so, we're getting the tools, and yet, it benefits a small minority. It benefits a small minority who, by the standards of the white created system, can check all the boxes. It is lacking in innovation and adaptation to the realities of a community. It connects directly to what Elle was talking about earlier in terms of how is it that there's an anti-Semitism secretariat and now the person, the envoy, is made permanent, but we don't have that for the Black community? Why is it that we have CIBC banks that have, not just CIBC, Scotia banks and others, that have Chinese writings in the Chinatowns? We don't find the equivalent for the Black community. Why is it that we have Jewish hospitals, but good luck having something called the Black hospital? It's all connected. Like, I'm sorry, it's all connected. The initiative is great on paper, but we know how too often the application is something else. The understanding that to uplift systemic racism requires an economic integration. I mean, the heroes behind me, notably Brother Malcolm X and Brother Martin Luther King, addressed it very much. You know, the 1963 I have a dream speech. It wasn't just about skin color. It was about the walk on poverty, which disproportionately affects Black people. The very conversation we're having about COVID and its concrete impact beyond healthcare is a matter of economics. Pandemics hurt people and create opportunities. Guess who tends to benefit the most of opportunities in a racist system? It is those who are privileged. How many of our people, Sister L can say so much about it, being in Nova Scotia, but also with the assistance of other of our Black figures such as Robin Maynard. How many of our Black people are still in jail because of marijuana possession, but now we have weed stores? We know who are making the money out of them. So there's a lack of innovation. and a lack of adaptation to our Black realities. I am not going to just throw away FACE. I'm not just going to throw away the Federation of African Canadian Economics, because we absolutely do need it. We need African Canadian economics, as said by Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and any Black activist, understanding that Black Lives Matter can't really matter if we don't also say buy Black, support Black, and Black entrepreneurship, but as well, Black salary people matter, but we need innovation, adaptation to the realities of our people. We need to educate, we need to mentor our people, we need to understand that we won't be able to fill all the check marks. And that becomes a fundamental problem if we want to uplift the Black community, but look at it with the lenses of white supremacy. We are doomed to fail. I think there's a comment, I have seen something. Sister Minerva said it so well.
Yeah, I was just going to read some of her comments.
When the design is flawed, the process and outcome will be ineffective. We are pretending, we're acting like we're in 1921 when the Jewish and Chinese communities have clearly shown within ourselves to adapt to our realities and the mindset of our people. We can create the tools, education, mentorship. I am a mentor. I mentor from 26 to, I think my youngest is 26 years old, a Black medical student. And I think my oldest is 36 years old. Also a Black medical student. This is the real work that we must do, but those will have the ears of those in power. Those who can knock and have an answer from the Black caucus or from whoever the politician is, the banker, the banking community is, the chambers of commerce. Fancy titles that mean nothing if the average Black person does not get to benefit and truly feel uplifted. Because when we fail at that, you can't surprise yourself they're not going to trust the vaccine going in their arm. You can't.
All right, let me just catch up on Minerva's comments here. So first of all, she says, glad you guys are having this conversation. It's important. Ryan and I have talked about this many times, and I've written about this, but when the design is flawed, the process and outcome will be ineffective, and this has to be addressed. She also continues and says, the most recent report says that 890 applicants are eligible, not received, eligible. And of that, 7% of the 890 had the required required documents for the consideration. Tim Frey says the buck was passed on to the Black intermediary companies, forced to use the same, quote, standard lending practices, unquote, the banks have been using forever. It gives banks a good marketing look, while our Black intermediary companies has to say no to most of our Black community startup businesses. It's like the slave master makes the house and then go in charge of the field and gas. Tim also says we need Facebook, we need fulfillment by our own Black philanthropy community instead of the systemic racialized banks and their system that was set to keep Indigenous, Brown, and Black people from wealth by not lending them capital. And also, Minerva asks a question, and maybe Ryan, you can answer this because you're the insider here. Do you know why FACE, who does FACE report to? Who are they accountable for in the process and the ultimate outcome of the program?
So I don't know who they directly report to. I would assume it'd be Minister Ng's office, because Minister Ng's office was controlling the portfolio, or it would be a branch of FedDev. But they haven't said, so if there's things that they can't do, they haven't told the community who we need to go and hold accountable to kind of release the pressure. So if it's Minister Ng's office and FACE is saying, hey, we can't do XYZ because Minister Ng said so, then as a community or as an organization, we can write those letters and go to Minister Ng's office and say, listen, this isn't what we signed up for. We are representing over 3,000 Black entrepreneurs that are not benefiting from this program you created, and you are holding FACE back from doing what they need to do. every time I get a call about it from, I would say, the other Black leaders that are part of this program, it's always, oh, just be patient. Oh, just let it, don't rock the boat. You're getting funding from them. You don't want to somehow lose your funding if you speak up too much. But that, like, I don't subscribe to that, where because you're getting money now you have to be quiet about things that you're observing that are broken. Just the fact that people would say that to me, I start to realize what I've been missing while being kind of the business ecosystem and not the nonprofit ecosystem, where you saw when Justin Trudeau had that blackface incident, and I was on News Talk 1010 at the time, and I'm asking the question, where did all of our Black leaders go? Like, nobody's upset about this. Like, why? Like, is it because they got funding from the UN Decade of African Descent? That was the price $25 million to keep us quiet about anything that the federal government does? It blew my mind. And now when I get these calls, I start to understand, because they get calls saying, yo, don't mess up your money. You're getting $25 million. Don't talk up too loud. That we have, and the only way is to wean ourselves off the titty of the government and get into our own infrastructure that has enough capital that we can be sustainable. And we're not there yet. I'm not saying give back the money. Hey, I'm getting a paycheck from running our organization, and there's 5 other staff members that are now getting paid by getting this funding. So of course I do not want to disrupt the flow of funds, but I am also not, I am not, how do I say that?
You're not complacent about it.
They haven't paid me enough to keep quiet. Like, I refuse to accept that I cannot speak on bad things that are happening in our community because we got $1 million. That to me does not compute. So all that to say, but Cesar said it best. We do need the FACE organization. And that's where I want this to work. But let us help you. Let us help you get better project management. Let us help you with our staff, with our volunteers. We have people in place that we can lean into this project and say, where do you need us to be? What do you need to get done? If there's 890 entrepreneurs and only 7% of them have the right documents, and that's out of the 20,000, remember, send them to us. Send them to the ecosystem so that we can work with them and get them to the baseline that will get them the money. So, and give us space to fail. Don't, Tim Frey was saying they're using the same criteria that the banks are using. So then what, the program isn't any different than me just walking into the bank or any Black entrepreneur just walking into the bank. It was designed to be different. So explain to us how you're different. If it's $30 million that you're going to pour into these entrepreneurs and it doesn't work out, give us that space to fail and learn from it, and knowing that you will still invest in us. If you're saying this 30 million, if it's not perfect, and out of everybody that gets money, they all don't pay it back, and out of this, every business owner that gets money, they don't hire 10 people, then you're never going to get money again. I'll say keep your check. I would not sign up for that. And FACE has. They're signed up to be the equivalent of the financial institutions that are currently running a broken system for Black entrepreneurs. And they seem good with that. I am not good with that. So, but I don't know how to fix it. All I can know is when they send me an entrepreneur, we can help them get ready to get money from anybody, not just from FACE. We get entrepreneurs ready for capital from any revenue source that is available.
Go ahead, Cesar.
Allow me to just add something important here. Something that a lot of people must understand is that when FACE, the Federation of African Canadian Economics, was started, and in terms of the Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund, so it's important to understand Black African Canadian. Words are mattering. It's targeting a community. When it was begun, some of the conditions on paper, talking about majority ownership, over 51% by Black Canadians, but also must identify as Black. When you have this type of words, but you fail to address and recognize the particularities of the community in terms of its lacks, deficiencies that require adaptation and integration, that is a fundamental problem. It's kind of like creating something great, amazing, claiming it's for a group, but in that very creation, such as the processes, putting in the elements for the failure of the vast majority. What was the intent truthfully? Because you can see the intent as nice as it can be on paper, but when in terms of impact, you don't even have 50% of those applying being able to receive a fund. You don't even have 25%. It becomes a systemic issue that are within the creation.
They're not even at 10%.
It basically becomes exactly the very structure of what white supremacy is. White supremacy works. It works for white people. For Black people, it is doomed to fail by the nature of us being Black. So we cannot have something African Canadian economics, Black entrepreneurship. Those are words and words created by the very same system in using the structure and the criteria of white-owned banks in a system of white supremacy very much condemn us. When we look at Marcus Garvey and UNIA, still to this day, 100 years later, the biggest and most successful Black organization in the world, still to this day, 100 years later, it was from Black creation to Black-led to Black execution for Black people. We have a problem when 100 years later we can't succeed. I'm not trying to be, it's not conspiracy. It's not some, my fist is in the air. I could be white and say the same things. There's a problem in the very system and its creation when you can't deliver to 50, 25%, 10%. That's a high failure rate. Something must be reviewed, and you shouldn't need to wait 5 or 10 years down the road.
Ella, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I've said this before, but I'll just reiterate that I think we also need to apply Black feminist lenses to these things. And again, I've talked about this a lot, that Black women often just need small amounts of money in order to get things off the ground, like $200 to go get your car registration fixed so you can drive and do a cleaning business. You just need a bit of money to buy some materials so you can cook in your kitchen. So I always try to advocate to people when they have programs that you don't need to have this huge infrastructure of thousands of dollars. You can just say just write us a quick letter, say what you need. If it's $500 to $1,000, we can give it to you right now. That would change so many Black women's lives right away. It's very small. I just need to get my documents in line. I just need to pay off this debt. I just need to get some materials. If I can just pay the application fee for this thing, then I can probably find money down the road. These are all things that our people need. So as Ryan's saying, that if you just replicate the same structures that already put us out, it doesn't do if I'm Black and I have an MBA, sure, I'm sure I know how to do the application and, that's great. But if I'm Black and what if I have a criminal charge? Shouldn't a Black entrepreneurship program be recognizing that many of our people have those charges and that's a barrier, and therefore we should be making that not a barrier? That many of our people have great business sense. We have historically been business people. There's been some great articles about North Preston and the history of entrepreneurship, embedded in North Preston, from going in and gathering wreaths and selling Christmas wreaths and all this stuff that people grew up with, making candy stores, that this is business. So it's great to have the bigger stuff and have the bigger loans that allow people to get something very ambitious off the ground. But it's also really important that our programs don't have these barriers in place so that somebody can get a couple of thousand just to do the minor things that then can set them on the road to just, making the money and doing so many people are cooking out of their kitchens and stuff. And we also need to understand that that's business. And I think particularly we know that Black women are overwhelmingly doing this kind of business and will overwhelmingly not be recipients of any of these kinds of programs. And then the final thing, Ryan, I really appreciate a bit about the credit union. There's a lot of obviously programs now where Black people are suggesting, for example, that if you're a Black person in a job who makes good money, commit 1% of your salary into a community fund every year. And we can use that as mutual aid, right? So we have wealth. Martin Luther King was talking about this at the end of his life. If you read I've Been to the Mountaintop, we all remember it because it's a speech before he got shot, but he talks about Black economic boycotts and like boycotting Pepsi and Wonder Bread in that. And he talks about how like if you just took Black American wealth, Black Americans, and this is like in the 60s, would be like the 9th most wealthy country in the world. So we have money. We have a Black middle class. We have a Black wealthy class. Like this pretense that like none of us have any access to resources. What we need to do though is take those resources and use them in mutual ways to then create the conditions in our communities. So yeah, like we can start thinking about like, yeah, how do we kick back like a small part of it? And then that's even like tax deductible, right? Like if we all put in like $200 a month or $100 or $50 or $20 into community funds, like, and then people can withdraw from it when they need it and put into it, like, which is actually a very old African process. I'm sure Cesar can talk about this. It's like the susu in like Nigeria, was common in Trinidad. Like people would just like put in the money and then every month a different person could like take the money. Like this is all stuff that we have these practices. These are our own ancestral practices. So I think it's just, yeah, it's really important that we don't then say, okay, like these are white barriers and that must be legitimate, so we have to replicate those barriers. We have to think about what are the actual barriers that have historically prevented us, and how do we work around that to make these programs relevant to our people and where we are.
Mm-hmm. And it's so key what you just said, because the $30 million that the government has allocated to this fund, in the grand scheme of things, is peanuts. They could carve out 30 million and say, listen, we want to give you the space to figure out what's best. We are trusting you, the Black community, to say, okay, this 30 million, figure out something and then report back to us how it went. And based on how it went, we'll talk about the next tranche. Instead, they gave the money and said, here is the only thing you can do with this money. We don't want to hear anything else. We don't want to hear about SUSU. We don't want to hear about credit union. We don't want to hear about grants. We only want you to do this exact thing that is just like the thing. It mirrors the thing that we're fighting, but we still feel like it's the best thing. So let's not rock the boat too much. Here's the money, but here are all the strings attached to it. If they gave that 30 million and said, hey, based on our own recommendations, we talked about loans between 500 and 25,000, because we saw with our own lending program that loans of 500,000, exactly like you said, Elle, make huge impact. It sometimes just takes a person registering their business to say, hey, and getting their driver's license or paying off the fines that their license is suspended. And I'm in the mobile car cleaning industry, so I work with people in our program that just need to go for their G2 test. And now it's unlocked all this earning potential for them. And it costs like $200. It doesn't take anything crazy sometimes. And then, hey, there's already options for the big players that need big cap. But again, if we get into that where VC funding is like less than 2% for the Black community, we can then deal with that. But there's a big spectrum, and they've solved this very small, narrow niche. And they're not open to listening to the rest. Well, I'm hoping that they're open, because I'm still in talks with Minister Ng's office to say, hey, we have to talk about the evolution of this Black entrepreneurship program. This isn't the be-all, end-all. So if you're open to conversation, we're able to chat with them. But hey, the election happened and everybody's kind of using that as an excuse to be like, oh, we're waiting for ministers to be appointed and we'll get back to you in November. So we'll see. But they've given us no space to just be our creative selves. We have so many different creative, innovative ways that we can help the community if we're fully resourced. But they resource us and lock us into a box. And I'm seeing it with my own eyes. Like even what we submitted locked us into a box. We can't do anything outside of that box with the money. So we have to like execute that program, but then figure out how to make that program sustainable so that we can earn our own revenue. Then we can do what we actually need to do with that money that we're earning. So and like Cesar was saying, Marcus Garvey's teachings, nobody's been duplicating it and we're actually going to see a movie about him tomorrow, Monday, with the Real World Film Festival. I just want that to reignite the passion in our team. I'm bringing like the ACBN team to go see it, just hoping that it ignites what's possible. It's so possible to duplicate what he did, but it's
my three things. But you know what? We're going to probably end it off there because we've gone longer than we usually do, but understandably we had to. Go ahead, Cesar. Huh?
Bring Ryan back.
If he has time, he's a media superstar. So, we have to get him under contract. Cesar, you need to share something.
What Ryan is saying is true. However, we need to also be able to self-criticize ourselves. It's not really the government's fault, to be honest. And we must not necessarily throw rocks at face. The truth of the matter, if you really want to have that honest conversation, is that lack of Pan-Africanism and Black consciousness in our communities. I'll give an excellent example. If we just give 1% of our salary, to many Black people that sounds crazy, but trust me, they'll give 10% and much more to the church and mosque. That's a fundamental problem. Anyone who knows me know I was going to go there. No, we have to go there. We have a problem. Do you realize something? Allow us to speak about Blackness.
Cesar, I thought we were going to end it. Obviously, we're not finished, so keep on going.
Allow me to say something here. If we dare to talk about Blackness as a whole, Africa as a continent is the #1 producer of churches and mosques, not of hospitals, not of universities. Ivory Coast does not have a world-renowned hospital, does not have a world-renowned university, does not have a world-renowned company, but Ivory Coast has the greatest basilica in superficie in the world. That is a fundamental problem. The same fundamental problem that when we look at our Black community in Canada and in the US, all the way to Brazil, looking at Europe, Africa, and in Asia, I've identified 3 cancers to the Black psyche. #1, entertainment. #2, consumerism. Consumerism, #2. #3, religion, aka Christianity and Islam. But the #2 cancer, consumerism, what does it do? It makes it that Black people are seen and valued as customers, not as entrepreneurs, not as people who put money back in the community, not as people will save. When we look at the Canadian average savings, it's less than $5,000 per family. I think in 2020, it was something like $1,100 or $2,200, less than $5,000. And when we know they talk about Canadian, they're talking overwhelmingly about white people. So we know for Black Canadians, it's lesser than $5,000. When we look at the average Canadian income for a family of 2 people, I think they're talking about something like $75,000 in terms of a household. We know very well in our Black communities, it is less than $75,000. So when we have an institution that on paper looks great, but it is created through the lenses of white supremacy, it's not just that we're doomed to fail. We are trying to repeat, but with Black faces. It is very dangerous because it also creates further distrust into the community. Then that further distrust that we see, allow me to give a very concrete example. I know we are out of time. A Black person will be rejected for funding because, let's say at 18, 20, or maybe as teenagers, they've been caught with marijuana. A white person will be given funding to open a marijuana store. Generational wealth and generational impoverishment are systemic issues that become centered upon a community uplifting itself, not the government. When I get contracts, I give 10% of my contract money into Roots and Culture Canada. I don't give it to the church. I don't give it to any mosque. I don't believe in Jesus, Allah, or anything. I believe in nothing. But I know one thing, if we as Black people want to uplift ourselves on the 4 corners of this world, on the 4 corners of the galaxy that has no corners, it starts with us. FUBU, for us, by us. Fundamental that we remember that. And we have to teach that to our children. Because Black people leave Africa and the Caribbean because of poverty. Chinese, Arabs, and whites are going there to get richer.
That's right. Africa is China dominated. It's a really good point. Anyone else have any last comments? This has been epic. This has been epic. All right. Well, let me just catch a few final comments because I'd like to get people's comments in. Yuri Hutchinson says, we need to look at our identity first before things can work. When we get our money from the government and you're African, they always control the strings. We need to be self-sufficient and make our own money, and we do and we can do it. Also continues, we are looking too much at the government while the riches and gold are under our feet. Also, there are Lebanese and Indians who run the supermarkets while the Chinese are taking over African countries' ports in Africa. Yes, Yuri says the race for African is on. I think it's already done. Forget it's on. It's done. It's from where I'm sitting. There isn't much time left for China to take over. So I would like to say thanks, everyone. Leslie saying great conversations. Thank you. Yes, this has been epic, 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 epic. So before we let everyone go, I did forget one last one. And this goes back to we're talking about COVID. All right. Sheraton says, we as healthcare workers are tired. Folks in our community need to accept that it is okay to change your point of view based on the evidence. The pandemic is ever evolving. Lack of use of credible information sources and, quote, pride, unquote, is having such a detrimental effect. So and the comments are still coming in. Whoa. Yuri saying, no, they're still in time. We just need to work together. Well, see, I'll just add this one last comment. This is the difference just with Chinese and North Americans or Americans. If America goes into a country and wants to help, they would say, well, you have certain human rights things, Chinese don't care about that. They just want the business. They don't care about the human rights. They're going to come in there. They want to do business. They don't care. They're focused on the capitalism. So I say there's hope for Africa, but something called an hourglass, that's where I'm going to leave it at. And I will
Sorry, one quick, just to put a pin in what Cesar was talking about around, and I remember Dr. Wilson Amos said it best. We have to stop being other directed and start being African directed. I'm still learning what that fully means, and I know Cesar touched on it.
All of us are still learning.
Yeah, so just understanding how we're other directed, whether it's the government or whatever institutions are telling us what to do, we have to figure out how to break out of that.
All right. Let's find out. L. Jones, where can people get in touch with you? You're on mute, Al. There we go.
Every week. You can try and add me on Facebook, but I'm at my friend's limit. Other than that, I don't really do social media. So you can just email me, el.jones@msvu.ca.
Dr.
L. Jones. Next up, Cesar.
Well, I must be doing something good. I'm still available on Facebook. Cesar Remy, R-I-M-Y. You will find me there, but even better, you can send an email to rootsandculturecanada.com, and our staff will welcome you. I just want to say a quick word. Very quickly, I want to give a great word of support to all of our people who are doing great work, who are not getting a media voice as here, who are not being interviewed even by mainstream media, but very silently in the background, they're supporting, they're cheering, they're listening to Dr. Vibe, they're writing in the comments, they're sharing. Too often, you are not given the credit, but deep down, you are Black and proud, and you are really keeping the faith in the work for the community. Please keep it up. Our children need to see you. They need more of you to be involved and to support. Thank you, my brothers and sisters.
And I would just say Ryan Knight.
Yeah, I mean, best contact is through WhatsApp. You can text me 647-225-3309 or go to ACBN's website, the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. So the website is acbncanada.com. If you're an entrepreneur that's looking to take the next step in your business, definitely fill out our business needs assessment form. We will call you back and figure out how best we can support you. And if you need capital, grants, operational support, we're here to help. And remember, there are now 30 Black-focused business organizations that have been funded through this ecosystem project or program. So the money is there for the organizations to help you. Do not let them sit on their hands. And that's including myself with the ACBN. Put us to work. Make sure you call us and figure out how we can support you so that we can, just get your business to that next milestone.
Fantastic. I just want to echo Cesar's words in regards to those who are doing the work that are not being seen. And anyone who knows people like that, please get them in contact with me, because this is the reason I like to do Black Canada Talking, to show the great work that's being done that mainstream media sources will never take the time to showcase them. I just want to say a few things. Thank you to all three of the panelists. We went way over, folks. So you got to give them a big thank you for taking the time. I'd like to thank everyone in the audience who watched this live or on the replay, or who'll be listening on the replay. This was epic. I'm just totally, my heart is full with this conversation. I will leave with my salutation, but I'm going to leave with something that Ryan and I tell Ryan all the time. And speaking of which, if you want to catch Ryan and myself, we're on every Monday and Friday morning at 9 a.m. on a program called The Morning Vibe, where we do this. We also have guests come in and showcase what they're doing. So please check us out. Follow me either on Facebook. Just go to the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook or YouTube. Subscribe, and you'll get alerted about great conversations like this. I tell Ryan a lot of times when I'm in conversation like this, and you may not agree with this, folks, but I'm putting it out there. This is my little contribution. Many Black people are challenged by one of these three things, or all a combination of. First of all, trauma. And a lot of people, a lot of Black people suffering from trauma. We get that. But I have two other things. Repetition. And people will say to me, what do you mean by that, Dr. Vibe? I mean, many Black people are doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And then finally, symbolism. Many of us love a good symbol, but underneath, what's really going on? Is it really being effective? Programs can get introduced, and I'm not speaking specifically about Facebook, but we all know many of a program that has been put out there to help us. But look, what are the receipts? What are the results? We love the symbolism, but what are the receipts in the end? So just remember that. Trauma, repetition, symbolism. So when you have conversations about Black communities and all that, think about those three things when the conversation goes in. Trauma, repetition, symbolism. As always, finish off with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions. Then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace. And thank you to BIA Media for hosting this epic conversation. We'll be back on Black Canada Talking next week. Have another special guest coming on. And watch the replays, subscribe, YouTube, and on Facebook. And also, if you're around 7:30 this Thursday, the 28th of October, hosting the Black Vax conversation, myself and some others going to have a roundtable conversation. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and walk good.